Good afternoon and welcome. We're delighted to have all of you here today. My name's Jenny Kitson, and I'm on the trust board, and I'm on the Land Trust Trustee Board. And we're so thrilled to have so many people here with us today. We're particularly excited about the fact that we have so many out-of-towners, and we hope that this will inspire you to love Chester the way we do. We have, of course, with us the Motley family, and we have the Freedom Trail Committee. We have elected officials, we have legal and judicial representatives, and we have everyone here who loves the Lower Connecticut Valley. Yes. So we hope that you will see why this unique little town has become the perfect place for the Judge Motley and her family to come here to rest, to reflect, and to restore her energy for so many years. We are so honored to have this preserve and the home designated as a heritage site with the Freedom Trail. I want to remind you before we proceed with the program that little housekeeping. We do have programs if you haven't picked one up, and if you haven't signed in, please do so over there at that table. And we also have a porta potty, which you can't see, but look for the blue building back there. It's back there. So with all of that, we're thrilled to have you here. And I'd like to begin our program by introducing to you Marta Daniels. She has been a social justice and civil rights advocate throughout her professional career, and she is now our own very Judge Motley local historian, and no better person than to guide us through this program this afternoon than Marta. So Marta?
I'm not going to say anything, believe it or not. I'm just going to introduce our second and third selectmen, our second and third mayor of the town, and I'll turn it right over to Charlene Janacek, who has something to say to us.
As Marta said, I'm Charlene Janacek. I am one of the selectmen in town, and I need assistance. This is James Krasbowski. He's our other selectman. Lauren Gister, who's our first selectwoman, couldn't be here today because she is attending her daughter's wedding. A good reason. I'd like to read a few of the highlights from the Town of Chester proclamation on Judge Motley. Whereas Constance Baker Motley was a distinguished civil rights attorney, New York State Senator, Manhattan Borough Council President, and a New York federal judge, all firsts for an African-American woman. In her early work with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, she helped enforce the Supreme Court's 1954 landmark decision, Brown versus Board of Education, by successfully litigating over 200 desegregation cases across 11 southern states, including 10 at the U.S. Supreme Court, another first for an African-American woman. Whereas a federal court judge for the Southern District of New York, Judge Motley handed down landmark rulings that increased the access rights of female sports reporters, the humane treatment of prisoners, the rights of workers, fairness in trade practices, and the equality of women in job opportunity and pay equity, among other advancements. And whereas Constance Baker Motley was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1993 and into the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame in 1998, receiving 31 honorary doctorates, and was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal in 2001. And since her death in 2005, the Chester community has championed the distinguished life of Judge Motley and is proud of her significant contributions to freedom, justice, and equality. And to that end, the Chester Land Trust purchased part of her former property with contributions from town residents and created a preserve in her name to honor her and her distinguished life. And the Chester Rotary established the Constance Baker Motley Scholarship for a young woman from New Haven to attend Camp Hazen each summer. And the Chester Historical Society, of which Judge Motley was a founding trustee, has created a permanent exhibit about her life and legacy in its museum at the Mill in downtown Chester. And whereas the town of Chester commends the exceptional work of the Chester Land Trust in establishing the Constance Baker Motley Preserve, and is honored to have Judge Motley's former property as a heritage site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Now therefore be it resolved, the town of Chester proclaims October 6, 2019, Constance Baker Motley Freedom Trail Day. And we would urge all Chester citizens to learn and be inspired by her significant legacy in American history. Thank you.
Okay. We give this out. I think we give one to the family, and we give one to the land trust. I'll take it. Okay. And one to the Comans. Thank you. All right. So, next thing on our program is the introduction or just welcoming of our stewards of this property. The Land Trust in Chester has stewards for each one of its properties, and the two stewards for this land are Bill Myers and Pete Uhas. We're also going to have Dennis and Courtney Coleman come up because they consider themselves honored stewards of her house. So will the four of them please come up? This is Bill Myers. And when you look around this place, it didn't look like this. These are the two men. Come on over, Pete, come on. These are the two men who made it look the way it does today.
All right, thank you everybody for coming today. Just a real quick overview here. Pete and I are we're like the caretakers of the property. So we have extensive plans here to build trails and work on the gardens in the future. So we've got big plans coming. A brief history: the Chester Land Trust, we're a nonprofit organization. We formed in 1987 for the purposes of protecting natural resources here in Chester. We currently own about 87 acres of land, and we have about 18 acres of easement property that we look over. Back in the spring of 2016, we found this property on the market, and negotiations began. We had a vigorous town-wide fundraising campaign, and the preserve was purchased from the Motley family in November of 2016. On June 24th, 2017, a formal dedication and ceremony was held here with family members, land trust officials, and the community at this site. The Chester Land Trust felt this was a clear opportunity to highlight Judge Motley's remarkable life and work, and thus the Judge Constance Baker Motley Preserve was formed. With the acquisition and preservation of the Motley Preserve, in partnership with the community, the Chester Historical Society, and the Chester Rotary, the Chester Land Trust earned a 2017 award for excellence in conservation from the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. It was an extreme honor for the Chester Land Trust to receive this award for the Judge Motley Preserve, and we thank Amy Patterson, President of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, who is here today. Thank you very much.
All right, this is Dennis Coleman with Courtney.
Hi. I just kind of stepped in it here. I was shopping for a house. It took me a long time to find this place. I was looking for an old house, and this is the place that I found. And I had sadly never heard of Constance Baker Motley before we moved here, and I think it's sad for all of us. I don't know how many people have heard of her. she should be a household name along with Martin Luther King and everybody else that fought in the civil rights movement. I feel tremendously blessed and fortunate to have come to this place in this time. I thank you all for being here. I live in this house, I own it, I suppose. I'm more of a steward, I'm a caretaker of it because I think it belongs to history. Not just Constance, but I think even beyond that. And she would have appreciated that too. She wrote a history about the house, it's amazing. And I'm glad that you're all here, and I appreciate you guys showing up. I get goosebumps walking around this house a lot, thinking about the history that's walked through it, recent and past. I really do. It feels like living in a museum sometimes to me. And I just feel blessed, and I hope you guys get a little bit more of appreciation for it. Both of us. This is just great, and I'm so glad that you all came out, especially Joel and Constance. Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Look at the program. We have a letter of commendation from our U.S. Congressman Joe Courtney. He wanted to be here today. He knows all about her. He had his 2nd district write an essay, all the students, about Constance Baker Motley, but he couldn't be here because he was in Europe. He's in Europe right now. So in his place, not in his place, but to read his short letter of commendation is Constance Royster from New Haven, who is the niece of Judge Motley.
Good afternoon. It gives me pleasure to read this letter from Joe Courtney from the Congress of the United States, 2nd District, Connecticut. Dear friends, congratulations on the dedication of the former home of Judge Constance Motley and Motley Preserve as a heritage site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. The Connecticut Freedom Trail is a state designation which recognizes 140 carefully selected sites that celebrate extraordinary African Americans whose lives have greatly expanded the circle of freedom and opportunity for all Americans. Constance Baker Motley's trailblazing efforts as an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund paved the way for civil rights victories and justices across our nation. She was not just a pioneer, but an inspirational civil rights activist. Her historic legacy includes desegregating schools in the South, defending the Montgomery bus boycott protesters, the Freedom Riders, and courageously representing Dr. Martin Luther King during his civil rights campaign in Georgia and Alabama. We are indebted to her work to create a more equal society and fortunate to have had such an iconic figure live in our community. As a heritage site on the Connecticut Freedom Trail, the former residence of Judge Motley and the preserve will serve as a beacon of hope and reminder for future generations of how far we've come. Judge Motley's integrity and tenacity in the face of adversity is an example for all of us in the continued fight for freedom and equality. I would like to thank the Chester Land Trust, the Motley family, and the Coleman family for their dedicated efforts to make this designation a reality. It is an honor to be part of this landmark occasion. Sincerely, Joe Courtney, Member of Congress.
And the Colemans. Right. And this is for the land trust, and this is our copy. But he only made one, they only had time to make one, but we copied it and everybody got one. All right, now, can't sit down. Next in the program is Senator Norm Needleman and Christine Palm, if they would come up and take a seat. Norm, you're going to be up first. Norm is our senatorial state district senator, and he's from the 33rd district, and he lives in Essex, but he's also the first selectman of Essex. So, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I have to say, I have to shout out Marta, because before I met her,
Sorry.
before I met Marta, I had never heard of Judge Motley, and listening to her bio and her achievements, her patience, her courage was really very moving. So when I became a senator last year, I was completely taken aback when I walked into the Senate caucus room, and Judge Motley's picture is in our caucus room. And I'm not sure most of the senators actually knew who she was, so I proceeded to send Marta a picture to let her know that that the judge's picture was there, and inform people who were, in many cases, quite surprised. Her work is legendary. She is the last person we see before we go take a vote, and that means an awful lot. I also want to say that to date, there have been only 3 African-American women state senators in the state of Connecticut. Currently, Senator Marilyn Moore is the only African-American woman seated, and I think that it shows that how far we've come, but how far we have to go to get equity here. So with that, I want to thank the group for coming, everyone for putting this together. Thank you for making your house, recognizing it as a landmark as it is, and I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thank you, Senator. Congratulations, Marta, and everybody here today for this wonderful accomplishment, which literally and metaphorically puts Chester on the map for everyone who cares about the history of jurisprudence, preservation of the land, women's rights, and of course, the slow, agonizing march toward true equality. I've been thinking a lot about scale in terms of historic preservation. This is a very big project in a tiny town in a small state, which gave the world an enormous woman. And I've also been thinking about a fellow named Freeman Tilden, who was born in Massachusetts and died at the age of 97 in 1980. He was considered one of the founders of the modern science of historic preservation. He had a 1957 book, Interpreting Our Heritage, in which he said, through interpretation, understanding, through understanding, appreciation, and through appreciation, protection. He said the chief aim of interpretation is not instruction, but provocation. I think Motley would have loved that idea, that in interpreting history, we are provoking this quiet little piece of land in a peaceful little town to action. We're actually provoking people to think more deeply about our individual and collective responsibilities in thinking deeply about class warfare, racism, misogyny, and all the societal ills that Judge Motley fought against. And it is an honor now to serve in the legislature with folks like Senator Needleman and my colleagues, Representative Robin Porter, Representative Bobby Gibson, who are here today, as we try to do in a small way to follow in her footsteps in fighting these injustices. This project and its designation on the Connecticut Freedom Trail is the very best kind of historic interpretation. And it makes us think about our responsibility every day. Given where our nation is right now, the timing is perfect, and I thank and congratulate everyone involved. Our Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysowitz, was very excited about this project. She, I learned recently, was a big fan of Motley's, and when Susan was the Secretary of the State, she dedicated the Blue Book, which is sort of our Bible, to Judge Motley. And so with her office, I worked on some brief proclamations, which I'm going to hand out later on. but I think it is important to formally recognize the people involved. So this is from the office of the Lieutenant Governor, and it's my privilege to read them. To the Chester Land Trust, in recognition of your commitment honoring the life and legacy of Judge Constance Baker Motley and her contributions to the civil rights movement through the inclusion of the Motley Preserve and House on the Connecticut Freedom Trail, I take great pleasure in honoring you. To Marta, for your success in gaining inclusion on the Connecticut Freedom Trail of the Constance Motley Preserve, your scholarship, tenacity, and dedication have resulted in this great achievement. Not only will the town of Chester forever preserve Judge Motley's memory in a way easily accessible to all its residents, the judge's hope for a better world will be forever embodied as well, thanks to your foresight and creativity. To the wonderful stewards, Bill Myers and Pete Uhas, for your excellent stewardship of the Constance Baker Motley Preserve, your careful maintenance and regard for this natural resource will forever protect Judge Motley's place in the town and the nation by creating a space where people can reflect in reverence on all she worked for and achieved in her notable lifetime. To the town of Chester itself, Susan Beisowitz takes great pleasure in honoring the town for recognition of your support for the Judge Constance Baker Motley Preserve and your town-wide effort to preserve the memory and legacy of this remarkable woman. Judge Motley loved the town of Chester, and its people honor her in return in perpetuity. Congratulations to all the citizens of Chester for the inclusion of this great site on the Freedom Trail. To the owners of this home, Dennis and Courtney Coleman, I take great pleasure in honoring you in recognition of your generosity and foresight in making the home of Judge Motley a welcoming place for scholars, historians, and advocates who honor her memory and legacy. As responsible stewards of this sacred place, you are helping keep alive Judge Motley's vision of a world in which racism and misogyny will one day be abolished. And finally, to the Motley family, I take great pleasure in honoring you on the occasion of this dedication. All gathered here and all who will visit this lovely preserve in days and years to come, honor your mother, grandmother, and aunt, Constance Baker Motley, for her seminal work in social justice, in advancing the cause of women's rights, in breaking barriers of race, in groundbreaking jurisprudence, and in furthering civil rights at a turning point in our nation's history. In so doing, we also honor her steadfast husband, Joel Motley II, who, well before other men of his generation, recognized and supported the genius and fierce accomplishment of his wife to the good of all who followed, regardless of race, gender, creed, or standing. We thank you for sharing her memory with all of us.
I'm Marta Daniels, and I would just like to make 3 points having to do with not keeping secrets, transcendence, and a 100-year anniversary that brought us to this day in this place. The first is that Judge Motley would come to our town and people would, as she drove up the street, say, "This is the judge from New York." And that's mostly all we knew about her. She was a federal judge from New York. And most of us had no idea about her background as a civil rights worker and a person who had struggled to change and dismantle segregation in this country. And when she died, we still didn't know. But then there was, oh, I didn't bring it, sorry. There it is. There was a film, and it's our loss that we didn't know it. I just feel really ignorant. I lived 15 years here when she was alive, and I did not know what she did. This is a film that was produced by Quinnipiac University and partly written by Gary Ford, and it opened my eyes. I saw it on PBS, and it blew me away. The British would say, gobsmacked. I was gobsmacked by this film. Then I said, I got to find out more about her, so I went to what was supposed to be the definitive Bible of the civil rights movement, written in 1988 by Taylor Branch. She's not even in the index. That really pissed me off. And finally, I stumbled onto her autobiography, and it is a tour de force. I learned about her life, I learned about the civil rights movement, but I also learned about the 14th Amendment. I know more about the 14th Amendment than I ever thought I would learn about due process and equal access. And finally, a year later came Gary Ford's book, which was, I guess you could say, the first biography of the judge, but it focused mostly on her civil rights work. And that enabled people in the town to do an exhibit at the Chester Historical Society, and for the Land Trust to really understand the full impact of what she had done. And there will be other biographies out about her. We used to say that Judge Motley was the best kept secret in Chester and in America. Well, we've changed that about Chester. We know about Judge Motley in Chester now, but there's a long way to go about learning of her in America. Second point is transcendence. In this divided time, in the anxiety that we must all feel no matter what side of the aisle you're on, I think we need transcendent moments. Today is a transcendent moment because we are honoring a person of great integrity, actual intellectual agency, and certainly a person who believed in the law. She believed that there was no civilization that could exist without equal justice under law, and she wrote her book. That was the title of her book, Equal Justice Under Law. And when we think about honoring her today, we are looking back to say things can change, things can be different. We have had heroes and people who have helped us understand what justice looks like and what integrity looks like. So I move from that to my third point, which is that we are sitting here today because of something that happened 100 years ago. In 1919, a man by the name of Clarence Blakesley, who was a New Haven engineer, you've heard of the Blakesley Engineering Company, came from that family. He was a businessman, but he also was on his way to becoming a philanthropist. He funded the first land that Camp Hazen YMCA, right down the road, was built on. It was his vision for an integrated camp, and he made it possible by giving Senator Hazen the money to build that camp. Now, in her book, Judge Motley talks about Clarence Blakesley. When she went to the National Women's Hall of Fame to be inducted, she talked about Clarence Blakesley. And what's important about this is that she always felt that he had made her life possible, which he did, the life that she went on, was able to go on. In 1938, when Clarence Blakesley, heard her speak at the Dixwell Community Center in New Haven and was so impressed that he wanted to honor her and to make it happen for her to go to school. He paid all of her fees to go to NYU. Well, first it was Fisk, but she moved to NYU and then to the Columbia Law School. So she knew about his life. He died in 1955. She wrote in 1998 in this book about what he meant to her and Camp Hazen. So she knew about the town of Chester, and it makes me wonder if she chose this town because of Clarence Blakesley. No, maybe not, but it does, to me, I just see the connection, and I think it's a good thing, and it shows you what a difference one person can make. He really cared about her. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make, and we are so honored to have all of you. We love the Motley family, and we're so glad that you keep making trips up here for us. And hopefully we will be able to see Joel's documentary about his mother, which came out before 2015, and it's original footage from the 1950s, civil rights footage. It's amazing. So we're going to have him back to give a special program on that, and we're going to invite everybody. But right now, the moment we've been all waiting for, I'm going to turn this over to the Freedom Trail folks. This is Todd Levine, and let me just get this program right. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do our thing. We'll do our thing.
Liz Shapiro.
We'll do our thing. I'm just going to move that so things don't fly.
Yep, I'm getting it off.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. On behalf of the Connecticut Freedom Trail, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the Department of Economic and Community Development of the state of Connecticut, you've been welcomed many times, but I would like to offer an official welcome. My name is Elizabeth Shapiro, and I'm the Director of Arts, Preservation, and Museums for the state of Connecticut.
And my name is Todd Levine. I'm an architectural historian for the State Historic Preservation Office for the state of Connecticut, and I am the coordinator for the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Now, the Connecticut Freedom Trail documents and designates sites that embody the struggle for freedom and human dignity and celebrate African American communities across the state of Connecticut. Now, the Connecticut Freedom Trail was established in 1995 by an act of the Connecticut General Assembly. The Connecticut Freedom Trail is in fact law. And when it was established, we had 50 sites across 30 towns. Today, we have 140 sites across 60 towns and cities across the state of Connecticut.
Really special day today, because today we're here to celebrate the 140th site added to the Connecticut Freedom Trail, the Judge Constance Baker Motley Preserve and Home. Now, the site was officially added to the Freedom Trail November 18th, 2018, and I know it's not 2018, but we are the state, and sometimes we move a little slowly, but there's a big but here. It is never too late to celebrate. The Connecticut Freedom Trail has three main categories of listings, and they are the Underground Railroad, the Amistad, and a category called Concepts of Freedom. The first two categories, the Underground Railroad and the Amistad, are very firmly anchored in the 19th century.
Now, we're very proud of these stories, the stories of the Amistad and the Underground Railroad. These are stories of amazing men, women, and children that changed the course of not only Connecticut history, but the course of the United States of America's history. But the stories don't stop in the 19th century. They don't stop in the 20th century. And the sad fact is the struggle for equality and equity continues to dominate the first score of years of the 21st century. Now, the Department of Economic and Community Development for the state of Connecticut recognizes that the Connecticut Freedom Trail is more than just the history of the 19th century. And to that end, as we update our new website, next year we'll be adding a fourth category to the Connecticut Freedom Trail called Civil Rights and 20th Century Contributions to the African American Story.
And who better to honor this recent period of significance and to be the first site added under this new category than Constance Baker Motley. The first African-American woman to argue before the United States Supreme Court, and first to hold the position of state senator of New York, and so many firsts, far too many to mention today.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite up folks from the Chester Land Trust, the Colemans, and the descendants of Constance Baker Motley to this area so that we can give you a little Sure.
Okay, you go that way. You guys can come over here.
Yeah, we will. We'll get everybody. So first, I'd like to, on behalf of the state of Connecticut, present Connecticut Freedom Trail plaque for the Constance Baker Motley Preserve to the Chester Land Trust. Wonderful.
This flag will be there.
Yes. All right. All right. So I also to the Colemans for opening your house and allowing us to add your private residence to the Connecticut Freedom Trail. And finally to the family and descendants to Constance Baker Motley for being a part of this story and to continue to be a part of the story that changes the shape of the United States of America. Thank you all. So I believe up next would be you guys. So please,
Yeah.
just welcome to the Senate.
Thank you from the Freedom Trail and all of you who've spoken, and particularly Marta, who's organized this and is perhaps the most ferocious historian of Constance Baker Motley in the world. And who captured my mother's sense of being a bit of a disruptor, as well as a lawyer and a judge. This house that my parents bought in 1965 as a sort of second home from New York City really became, I think, the center of not just our immediate family life, but part of the reason she got it was that so many of her siblings and their children, my 14 first cousins, all lived in and around New Haven. And so this became really a wider family place. And so it resonates for all of us all of the time. That's why whenever you invite us up here, and even when you don't invite us up here, we sometimes come up on our own. I'd like to say I'm glad my wife Isolde is here. Our 3 kids are off doing God knows what, but at least she's here with me. I'd also like to mention one of your neighbors here, Karen Goodrose, a state court judge who organized a screening of my film that I made about my mother for the judges of the state of Connecticut. They have a annual judges conference, and Karen chairs their education committee. And so I showed the film there. It was certainly, I think, perhaps the most moving of all the screenings I've ever done. There were 200 judges there. And after the film, they gave a standing ovation. And after the Q&A, they gave another standing ovation. Many of them literally came up in tears because they're all lawyers and they're all judges. So they knew how hard her work really was firsthand. And they were so moved by the story. And I really, I've done, the film's been to 10 or 15 film festivals. I've done 10 or 20 screenings for folks around, and that was perhaps the most moving. So thank you, Karen and the judges. Really means a lot. Thank all of you for coming out here and sharing this moment with us. My mother was a passionate historian. She was also a bit of a workaholic. So she, every summer for about 10 years, worked on a history of the house, which luckily Dennis and Courtney have, documenting it back to 1745 when it was first built, and everyone who owned it right up until us. So it resonates on many levels. So thank you all for coming, and we'll look forward to the years ahead of remembering her.
Did you want to? Yeah. Connie wants to speak, and you're welcome to respond if you'd like. Whoops.
I just want to ditto what my cousin Joel said, and thanking all of you for coming. The house, this land means a great deal to the family. Thank you to the Colemans, thank you to Marta, and thank you to all of you who've come out. I see so many familiar faces in this audience from different parts of my life, our lives. I see a classmate from Yale, Kay, thank you. I see our lawyer who did this, who made this happen, David, and his wife, my dear friend Lisa. I see Gary and Marilyn Ford. I see a lot of people who are here who took time out of their day to celebrate. I know there are people who knew my aunt from Chester who are here. And I just I know there's another person from the Connecticut legislature here. Thank you for coming out. I think this is a really wonderful showing of support for what all of this stands for and all of this means, and I think we have a lot of work to do going forward, but today we celebrate. Thank you very much.
If somebody would like to comment, just stand up and speak loudly if you would like to say something. Speechless? Yeah. We have an audience? Yes.
I will say that one place that she is recognized is in the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. And you can't see the films there and the exhibits and not learn about Constance Baker Motley.
Anyone else want to share? Bill.
This is totally unplanned, but I'm a big birder, a naturalist, and I'm the steward again for the property. While sitting in the corner during Joel's speech, I looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw a peregrine falcon fly overhead.
All right.
That's true. Right over here. It's the first one I've ever seen in Connecticut, so I think that maybe someone from above was looking down on us.
Yes.
So about 8 years ago, I moved to Chester and fell in love with a woman who lives just up there. And every morning I'd ride my bike by here and I'd see that house. And I wondered who lived in that house. And as I got to know Chester more, I got to know more about Mrs. Motley. But I felt like it was magic.
That's a good way to put it.
So
Anyone else?
It's fascinating to see everybody here and to imagine that she was here with Charlene Hunter Galt and all of the family, and that she brought people together. And so it's marvelous to see that it continues and that it's a really special house and special place.
Anyone? Dennis.
I'll just say that, you're all welcome to wander through. The doors are open, so feel free.
I'm going to pick on that clue about where to learn more about Judge Motley. We have the Historical Society Museum, which is right downtown on Main Street as you go into the village, and it's open this afternoon, and we're happy to leave it open. Usually it closes at 4, but if anyone is interested, please let us know, and we're happy to leave it open a little bit longer, so after you enjoy the refreshments and the opportunity to tour the house, which is an open invitation, which you just heard from Dennis, we would be happy to make sure that you can go and check out the exhibit that's there and learn a little bit more about this lovely little town. So we would be there's a Motley exhibit that's specifically on the second floor, and then there's history for with regards to the whole town that's available for you to look. I want to give a quick thanks to Jean-Claude, who is doing our audio equipment here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to Skip, who is with the Historical Society, for taking photographs, and again, the Rotary for helping with our parking. Again, this is an example of the community always coming together, and we have so many opportunities to work with each other, and it's a delight because this town always seems to pitch in and help everybody. So with that, we have media packets. If there are individuals from the media who want more information, we have packets here, and please enjoy yourself and have some refreshments. It's right over across the street. And check out the house.